Now, we're going to dive into the rubric and scoring of the scholarship applications. We designed our rubric based on the work of William Sedlacek, a psychologist at the University of Maryland. Dr. Sedlacek also served on the Washington State Achievers Research Advisory Committee. He developed a system of non-cognitive variables to measure the likelihood of success for traditionally underrepresented students enrolled in a college degree program. Dr. Sedlacek found a positive correlation between non-cognitive variables and persistence toward degree attainment. We'll talk a little bit more about this framework and what you should keep in mind as you are reading some of these scholarship applications in the next slides. At College Success Foundation, we are looking for scholars who demonstrate some level of development in these three areas: situational adversity, academic promise, and non-cognitive qualities. You're going to use the content of the application, transcript, and letter of recommendation to assess and score these applications. So let's break down these three areas. The first area is situational adversity. You may find this in student essays. Now, a lot of students will discuss challenges or adversities that they have never discussed with anyone else before. Please understand that students may be coming from a place of vulnerability when sharing their stories, and it's an absolute privilege of ours to be able to read their stories. Now, students that face adversity should not be defined by those adversities, rather for what they can achieve. At CSF, we value the growth, determination, and perseverance that students demonstrate. It's important to look for the student's character, which may be impacted by the challenges they have faced and have overcome or are currently in the process of overcoming. So don't evaluate or rank the adversities, rather assess how adversity helped build the student's character. We are not necessarily looking for that all-star 4.0 GPA student who's involved in multiple extracurricular activities. We like to see a student who displays a strong sense of responsibility, a role in their community, or gaining a better sense of who they are and what their goals are. And these traits may sometimes be affected by these three areas on this slide. Understand that students who may be facing financial disadvantages or circumstances in the home may have added responsibilities that impact their involvement in what we traditionally define as volunteer activities. So, for instance, some students may have to watch or care for younger siblings or need to work to contribute financially to the household. So we must widen our definition to include activities home, at the place of worship, or school. Financial disadvantage may be reflected in this family's income or if the family receives any aid or benefits like free or reduced price lunch. Especially during the pandemic, many families experience a reduction of work hours or may have been laid off and are still currently unemployed. There may be home or life circumstances that the student may be impacted by, so look for the family's history, such as level of education in the family or any history of adversity, because that can show a trend in intergenerational barriers. We want to look for how the student responds to situational adversity. Not that the student may grow out of their challenges, but look for how the student shows up and supports their family or themselves. Taking additional responsibilities showcases growth and maturity. We want to see how the student navigates systems that perhaps their family never had the opportunity to fully participate in. Navigating a landscape for the first time and being that trailblazer is challenging in itself. And we value our students taking that path to change their family histories. Another thing to add is when we think of financial limitations, some students could respond to their immigration status, placement in the house, placement in foster care, absence of one or both parents, incarcerated parents, chronic illness, mental health, or unemployment, and so on. These are ways that may have affected their lives, but also affect their financial circumstances. We also look for students who display academic promise. In the student application, you will find the student's most recent transcript. You can look for academic promise in their grade point average and performance in their courses, especially those that are related to their major. Now, the grade point average does not necessarily provide a well-rounded view of a student's performance in high school, but it's more indicative of content mastery and ability to navigate school. I want to remind you that we are not looking for the 4.0 students, but students who display academic growth. Lower grades in any category is not preferred, but we need to understand the student's circumstances and not take their GPA or transcript at face value. If the student has a strong performance in math and are looking to pursue a math-related major, this is a great sign. But if a student is pursuing journalism as their major and have lower grades in math, this doesn't necessarily mean that they are not college ready. If a student has struggled in a few courses, look if the student has an upward trend later. Adapting to new environments such as a high school may be challenging, and so perhaps the student's grades may show a learning curve in their growth in adapting to their new school. Or there may be outside circumstances that have affected their grades for a particular year or term. Be sure to look into the student's essays or the recommendation letter to see if the student or recommender provided some context to any lower performance in their academic history. This can be super helpful in informing us on how the student may overcome challenges. Now, the last area we want to cover is non-cognitive skills that we mentioned earlier through the work of Dr. Sedlacek. While non-cognitive skills may be controversial, research tells us that students who demonstrate some of these skills tend to be ready for college and can persist and succeed. So, for instance, in general terms, studies show that non-cognitive skills showcase an increased ability to work in teams, set and achieve goals, demonstrate empathy, have a heightened interpersonal communication skills. Students have a clear investment in their community and awareness of their own skills and limitations. The yellow words on this slide are going to correspond with non-cognitive skills on the scoring rubric. We ask you to assess students on these 5 variables. Let's break these down a little bit further to give you a better sense of what to look for. Let's start with growth and maturity. This can help show how a student can navigate challenges, set goals, or seek support. When we refer to navigating challenges, we want to know how students learn to handle circumstances or obstacles they face. As you read the essays and recommendations, you may see many of the students have faced hardships and overcome them. We ask them to describe this, but it is the how they discuss the challenges they face that is important. It says a lot about our abilities and potential. Is there any growth? Has the student learned any lessons from what they experienced, or did they transform an adversity into an opportunity? One thing to look at is how did they use situational adversity or personal challenges to inform them on self-improvement or even seek support? What perspective do they have? Are they using critical thinking and problem solving? And does the student show or display a growth mindset? Research also shows that students who have long-term goals tend to do better in college than those who don't. But I do want to challenge you to remember who you were at age 17. Did you know what you wanted to study? Were you able to articulate short and long-term goals? For those of you that grew up out of the United States with scarcity or political upheaval. Choice is really a foreign concept, a muscle that has not been exercised. So choices are difficult to make, especially when there are so many options. All that to say, students may be undecided, and that's okay. However, we try to view the student's circumstances holistically using something we call magical thinking. For example, a nursing major that performs poorly in math and sciences. Look at other aspects of the student. Did the student get involved in programs at a local hospital or volunteer? Did they mention seeking out tutoring services to help improve their grades? Now, when it comes to goal setting, did they take the steps to help them decide what major to pursue? Does the student demonstrate the process of establishing an outcome? Have they talked about how they came to that goal? Have they involved themselves in learning or activities that help them make or narrow the decision? Now let's move on to determination, which is both a firmness of purpose and a willingness to work incessantly towards that purpose, regardless of any obstacles, difficulties, or failures along the way. One of the ways this is displayed is through engagement, which requires sustained effort. Research shows that students who are involved are more successful in college. Now, engagement doesn't necessarily have to be outside the home, but we want to assess if the student can speak to their own role within systems and their responsibilities for others. It could be something as seemingly minor as going grocery shopping for the family, taking younger siblings to activities, ensuring grandparents take medication, and so on. These non-cognitive skills, coupled with academic perseverance, become essential to navigating the college landscape. So we're looking to see if students display determination in their application, such as being engaged and demonstrating a sustained effort to be college ready. Now, the last cognitive skill to look for is if the student has demonstrated the ability to problem solve. In this area, we like to discuss realistic self-appraisal. When you are looking at applications, try to identify if the students do self-evaluation. Do they reflect and adjust? Does this show their ability to assess their strengths and shortcomings realistically? Does it seem like the student knows themselves, at least to the extent a 17-year-old can? Does it seem like they have blind spots? Can they see failure, talk about it, identify the root cause, or instead do they blame others or distort circumstances? Can they identify obstacles and anticipate how they avoid or compensate for them? What about their strengths? Do they know how to use their strengths to the best of their abilities? College is a transformational time for many students, and the ability to set goals, do self-evaluation, adjust, and problem solve speaks to the student's ability to persist. As I mentioned earlier, there is a letter of recommendation included in the scholarship application. The letter of recommendation can tell you a lot about the student that may not be evident anywhere else on the application. Thoroughly reading a letter of recommendation may help you develop a sense of a student from someone who may have mentored or taught them, or even interacted with them during life's circumstances. When reading through these letters, ask yourself these questions. What is the overall impression the recommender has of the student? What is the recommender saying about the applicant? We want you to evaluate the content. We're looking for insight into the student and hopefully some overlapping or corroboration of information provided by the student. Like I mentioned earlier, does the recommender provide support in the reason a student may have had bad grades? We also want to make sure that you are scoring or you're not scoring or penalizing the student for the choice of their recommender or the recommender's writing ability. This is crucial. Remember that the recommender is not the one applying for the scholarship. Rather, they are the support person providing you context of who the applicant is. So, putting this all together, We are looking for students at the intersection of the three metrics we discussed. Students who showed determination and growth in these three areas. Get a good sense of who the applicant is and get an idea of where they are at. Use the overall impression to help guide your decisions through the assessment categories. You will rate each applicant on 5 measures. We want you to tell us if the student shows no evidence, some evidence, positive or superior evidence in each one of the categories. We're not asking you to score the students' transcripts, but use them to help you as they provide you with some insight into the student. Now, don't be surprised if you find yourself taking leaps of faith with decisions you make. There is no magic formula or recipe for this. This is more of an art rather than a science. Also, if you find a particularly compelling story or a student with really excellent writing skills, please put a check mark on your review form. It'll be located at the bottom. Many times, CSF is contacted by news agencies, or maybe we're advocating or writing a piece on an education topic. And it's great to have a list of students we can contact for these types of occurrences. Finally, let me give you one last tip. Read the whole application before you start scoring. This way, you get a sense of who the applicant is and get an idea of where they're at. From there, you'll be able to score them more holistically rather than looking at them by each section of the rubric or by each section of the application.